4:41 p.m. The courtroom froze before anyone understood why. A young man in expensive shoes leaned back, grinning as though the world existed solely to amuse him. His voice sliced through the quiet, smooth and self-assured. "You work for me," he said to Judge Judy, loud enough for the cameras, soft enough to seem practiced. The atmosphere shifted, but her eyes did not. And in that stillness, everyone sensed something volatile was about to snap. Judge Judy's gaze sharpened the way a blade catches light. The courtroom did not breathe at first. It simply watched him. This young man with tailored arrogance sewn into every inch of him, from his expensive shoes to the careless way he draped himself across the defendant's chair. Ethan seemed convinced the courtroom was just another room in his father's estate, a place where people existed to nod and disappear once he finished speaking. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. The space between them filled with something cold and electric. Even the cameras seemed more alert, as though sensing that whatever was about to happen would not be ordinary. "State your full name," she said. Ethan smirked. "Ethan Mercer," he replied, stretching the syllables like he was bored. "But I assume you already know who I am." Her brows lifted barely, just enough for the audience to shift in their seats. Maria Santos, the plaintiff, stood across the room, clutching a thin folder against her chest. She was composed, unhurried, and carrying a wariness that did not belong to someone who had simply filed a claim. She watched Ethan with a mixture of hurt and disbelief, the way someone watches a person they once trusted reveal a stranger's face. Judge Judy returned her attention to Ethan. "Tell me why you think we are here today." "Because she wants money," he said, gesturing dismissively toward Maria. "And because people love wasting my time." He did not look at her when he said it. He looked at the audience, at the cameras, as though performing for a crowd that admired entitlement. Judge Judy tapped her pen once, the sound crisp. "Your time," she repeated. Interesting choice of words. Behind Ethan, his mother sat rigidly, her posture a stark contrast to his casual sprawl. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. She watched him the way a person watches a fire they are simultaneously proud of and terrified by. Her eyes flicked to Judge Judy, then back to her son, as though silently hoping he would choose a different tone. Judy shifted her gaze toward Maria. "Miss Santos, you filed this claim in one sentence. Tell me why." Maria swallowed. "Because I worked for him for months," she said quietly. "And he never paid me." The room tightened. Ethan laughed under his breath, a dry, dismissive exhale. She volunteered. She was grateful just to be part of something meaningful. Judge Judy's eyes locked on his. "And did you tell her that? That she was not going to be compensated?" "I assumed she understood." "You assumed," Judy repeated, letting the word hang in the air long enough for his mother to shift uncomfortably behind him. "Look, this whole thing is pointless." "No," Judy cut in, voice calm but ironed flat. "What is pointless is your attitude." Her pen tapped again. Once, twice. Then she leaned forward. "We are not in your father's house," she said quietly. "Sit up." Ethan's smile faltered. Just a flicker, but enough to ripple through the room. For the first time, something unsettled him, and Judge Judy saw it. The shift was subtle at first. A breath, a glance, a tightening of the shoulders. But the moment Maria Santos opened her folder, the balance of the room changed. Even Ethan's smirk paused, as though the truth had briefly brushed against him. Maria stepped forward with careful movements, as if every action required permission from her own courage. The lights above hummed softly, casting a pale glow on the paper she unfolded. Her hands did not shake, but their deliberate steadiness told the room she had shaken enough times before today. Judge Judy observed without a word. She let the silence carry weight, the kind that makes every truth feel heavier. "Miss Santos," she said, "tell me what happened directly." Maria nodded once. "I was hired by Mr. Mercer to oversee renovations on a property he owns. He said he wanted it done quickly, professionally, and discreetly. I delivered everything he asked, every deadline, every detail. But when it came time to pay," she exhaled, "he disappeared." Ethan scoffed. "Disappeared? I travel. Important people do." The audience murmured, a ripple of disapproval rolling across the room. Ethan adjusted his collar as though it were the world that was misbehaving, not him. Maria continued, eyes fixed on the judge, not Ethan. "For 3 months I requested payment, gently at first, then firmly when I began falling behind on my own bills. He kept saying, 'Next week or my assistant will handle it.' But nothing ever came." Ethan leaned back, arms folded. "She is exaggerating, Your Honor. She practically begged me to let her work for me. People like her." He gestured vaguely toward Maria without looking at her. "Take whatever attention they can get." Judge Judy's gaze snapped to him, cold and precise. "People like her," she repeated, "have something you appear to lack. Respect." The room went still. Ethan blinked as if unfamiliar with being spoken to that way. Maria lowered her eyes. Not from shame, but from the exhaustion of reliving it. "I never begged," she whispered. "I trusted him." The words landed heavier than any accusation. Judy tapped the file Maria had submitted. This shows your invoices, your emails, your requests for payment, all unanswered. She turned a page. And here is a text from you, Mr. Mercer, saying, "You'll be paid when I feel like paying you. Care to explain?" Ethan shrugged. It's called humor. She takes everything personally. Judy's jaw tightened just slightly, the kind of movement that replaced shouting with something far sharper. Does this courtroom look like a comedy club to you? Behind Ethan, his mother straightened, a quiet flinch crossing her expression. It was the first crack, a subtle one, signaling that Ethan's version of events was not as clean as he wanted the world to believe. Maria lifted her folder once more. "Your Honor, I simply want what I earned. Nothing more." Judge Judy nodded. "And you will have it once the truth is properly settled." 4:42 p.m. She turned slowly to Ethan. "Mr. Mercer, your confidence is impressive. But your timeline," she tapped the folder once, "does not match your story." Ethan's smirk returned, but thinner now, more defensive than proud. Judy slid Maria's file closer, her eyes never leaving him. "Let us begin with the first discrepancy." Ethan shifted in his seat, barely but enough for the room to notice. The golden confidence he wore like armor did not shine as brightly now. Judge Judy's silence pressed against him heavier than any accusation. The courtroom settled into a quiet so sharp it felt like a blade. Judge Judy flipped through Maria's documents one page at a time, each turn measured, each pause deliberate. Ethan watched her with the unease of someone waiting for a trap they believed could not possibly exist, yet feared might spring anyway. "Mr. Mercer," Judy began, "you claimed Miss Santos worked for you for only 2 weeks. Because it is true," Ethan replied quickly. "Too quickly." Judy held up a printed chain of emails. "Then explain why you thanked her for completing the month-long exterior restoration and reminded her about a new phase starting Monday." Ethan blinked. His mouth opened, then shut. That is not what I meant." "It is what you wrote." He shifted again, sitting up straighter as if posture alone could restore authority. His mother leaned forward behind him, her face tight with quiet, restrained panic, the kind only a parent recognizes as the beginning of something unraveling. Judy continued, "And you still have not provided the contract you claimed she signed." "It exists," he insisted. "You will see. I asked you for it in Section 1. Judy said calmly. "Where is it?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "My assistant is bringing it." Judy's eyes narrowed. "Your assistant? The one you blamed earlier for mishandling emails?" He hesitated. The pause was brief, but it fractured the air. "Employees are unreliable," he muttered. Maria stood perfectly still, watching him without anger, only disappointment. It seemed to unsettle him more than any accusation might. Judy pushed a new document forward. "This is Miss Santos's work log. Every entry is time-stamped, accompanied by photographs of progress on your property." She lifted her chin toward him. "Do you dispute any of this?" He crossed his arms. "I do not track every little thing she did. That much," Judy said, "is obvious." His mother whispered his name. "Ethan, soft. Pleading." He snapped his head toward her, irritation flashing across his face. "Mom, please let me handle this." But the moment he turned back to Judy, his composure did not fully return. A crack had formed, thin but spreading. Judy noticed it. Everyone did. "Miss Santos," she said, shifting her attention. "Did you ever receive a formal contract from Mr. Mercer?" "No, Your Honor," Maria replied. "He said everything would be handled later." Judy exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that warns a room the gears of justice are turning. "Mr. Mercer, that means you hired someone for professional work without paperwork, refused their requests for payment, and then told them they had misunderstood the nature of their role." Ethan's eyes darted toward the audience, searching perhaps for someone to affirm his entitlement. But arrogance thrives in echo chambers, not courtrooms. "Look," he said, leaning forward. "None of this is a big deal. She is making it one because she wants—" "Stop." Judy cut in, raising a single finger. "Because what comes out of your mouth next may determine how much trouble you are actually in." The room held its breath. Ethan held his tongue. Judy's gaze hardened. "No, bring me the contract you claim she signed." Ethan swallowed, glancing toward the door as though expecting salvation to walk through it. His mother looked down at her hands, trembling now, and the courtroom sensed the truth. The armor was beginning to split. The door creaked open, too softly for a true rescue, too late for a prepared lie. A young assistant hurried in, clutching a folder as though it were a burning match. Ethan's relief looked practiced and far too eager. The assistant approached the bench with quick, apologetic steps. His eyes stayed low, his shoulders rounded, every movement radiating fear, not of Judge Judy, but of the man seated behind him. He placed the folder in Judy's hands as though offering evidence at a crime scene. "Sorry for the delay," he whispered. Judy did not answer. She did not need to. She simply opened the folder. A contract sat inside, crisp, white, untouched by time. Too untouched. She lifted it between her fingers. "This is the agreement you mentioned, Mr. Mercer." Ethan leaned back, confidence swelling as though the paper itself had vindicated him. Yes, exactly as I said. Judy's eyes traced the signature line, then Maria's name, then the date. Her expression remained neutral, but the air shifted, subtle, icy. Miss Santos, Judy said calmly. Is this your signature? Maria stepped forward, studying the page, her brow furrowed. No, Your Honor. That is not how I sign my name. And the date, I was not even working for him yet. Ethan exhaled loudly, irritated. She is lying. Obviously she is lying. She will say anything to win. But his voice betrayed something. An edge of desperation creeping beneath the arrogance. Judy raised the paper to eye level, letting the light slide across the ink. The courtroom leaned in with her, as if the truth might reveal itself in the tilt of the page. Mr. Mercer, she said slowly. Why does this ink look fresh? His smirk twitched. It is a clean copy. Clean copy. Judy repeated, her tone flat. From a contract allegedly drafted months ago. Ethan nodded, doubling down. Yes, and printed on paper so new. She continued, lifting it slightly. It still smells like tunner. Behind him, his mother closed her eyes. Painful, knowing, defeated. The kind of gesture that reveals more than any confession. Judy set the contract down with surgical precision. Miss Santos, have you ever seen this document before today? No, Your Honor. Never. Judy did not blink. Mr. Mercer, did you prepare this contract recently? Ethan laughed, the hollow kind, brittle around the edges. You cannot be serious. Why would I do that? Because, Judy said, tapping the page, the signature has been traced. A murmur rolled through the courtroom like a wave hitting stone. Ethan's face drained of color. His assistant stiffened. His mother's hands gripped the bench behind him. That is ridiculous, Ethan snapped. You are accusing me of forgery. Judy's stare remained steady, unmoved by the outburst. I am stating what is in front of me. The strokes overlap inconsistently. The pressure marks indicate hesitation, and the date placement is misaligned. A common error when someone copies a signature rather than writes one. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. Silence, the dangerous kind. Judy lowered the contract slowly, deliberately. Mr. Mercer, she said, voice calm as glass. We are just beginning, and everyone understood. Something far worse than arrogance had just surfaced. Ethan's denial hit the room like a cracked bell, loud, sharp, and hollow. But the silence that followed rang even louder. Judge Judy let it linger, allowing the weight of the fabricated contract to hang in the air like smoke. Ethan leaned forward, gripping the edge of his table as if confidence could be summoned by force. The smirk he once wore proudly had thinned into something anxious, something almost trembling beneath the surface. The golden armor was still there, polished, loud, blinding, but now it echoed with emptiness. Your Honor, he began, stretching the words. I did not forge anything. She signed that contract willingly. She was delighted to work for me. Maria stood still, her gaze calm. She looked at him the way someone looks at a person who has lied so often that the truth has become foreign to them. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. Judge Judy folded her hands. She was delighted, she repeated. Delighted enough to sign a contract on a date she had never met you. Ethan hesitated, the pause like a stutter in the rhythm of arrogance. I do not remember the exact timing. Maybe she forgot. People forget. Judy raised a brow. People forget entire months. He inhaled sharply, grinding his jaw. She is doing this on purpose. She is doing this, Judy replied, because you did not pay her. A few audience members nodded quietly. Ethan caught the movement and straightened, trying to reclaim control. He pointed at Maria. She was unprofessional. She made errors. I had to redo half her work. Maria's lips parted, but she did not defend herself. Instead, she opened her folder and slid out a stack of photographs. Progress pictures neatly labeled, showing each phase of the renovation. I documented everything, she said softly. Every wall, every fixture, every detail you approved. Ethan's mother looked at the photographs with wide, troubled eyes. She reached out as if to touch one, then pulled her hand back, guilt flickering across her face. Judge Judy traced a finger along the images. These look thorough, organized, and, she glanced at Ethan, professional. Ethan's foot tapped against the floor, restless, unsettled. Anyone can manipulate photos. Judy snapped her gaze to him. But you cannot manipulate your own words. She lifted a printout of Ethan's messages, short, demanding, laced with entitlement. Finish by Friday. Fix the lights again. Do not bother me until it is done. And then the one that made the room go rigid. You will be paid when I feel like paying you. Ethan swallowed hard. I was joking. No, Judy said quietly. You were not. The assistant who had delivered the contract shifted uncomfortably. Eyes fixed on the floor, his posture screamed awareness, knowledge he clearly wished he did not carry. Judy turned to him suddenly. Do you know anything about this contract? His head jerked up. Panic, pure unguarded panic. I just printed what he gave me. Ethan spun toward him. Do not speak. But fear had already fractured whatever loyalty the assistant carried. Judge Judy raised her voice a fraction. Let him speak. The assistant's breath trembled. He told me to print it yesterday. A gas swept through the courtroom. Ethan's face lost all color. Judge Judy leaned back, her expression colder than before. "Then it seems," she said softly, "we must compare your version of the truth to the real one." And Ethan Mercer realized that the lie he believed would protect him had just become the loudest evidence against him. 40:43 p.m. The assistant's confession had barely finished echoing when Maria opened her folder again. This time she was not shaky or hesitant, she was steady, certain. And certainty has a way of shrinking arrogance into something small. Maria stepped forward, placing a stack of printed emails and screenshots on the edge of Judy's bench. Each page was neatly clipped, dated and arranged with meticulous care, as though she had anticipated this moment long before it arrived. "Your Honor," she said, her voice soft but unwavering, "I saved everything." The word everything landed like a quiet warning. Judge Judy tilted the stack toward her, letting the pages fan slightly. "Let us see what his timeline actually looks like." Ethan rolled his eyes dramatically. "This is absurd. Anyone can manipulate emails." "Anyone," Judy replied, "except someone who does not know how timestamps work." A low ripple of laughter moved through the audience before Judy lifted a hand, restoring silence. She flipped to the first page, a message from Ethan. "Start Monday. I want daily updates." The date 3 months before the date on the fabricated contract. Judy turned another page, a photo Maria had sent, walls freshly primed, floors taped off for painting, another timestamp. Another contradiction. Ethan shifted, tapping his fingers rapidly on the table, frustration building like pressure behind his ribs. Maria pulled out her phone. "If it helps, Your Honor, I also brought the originals." She navigated the screen with calm precision, showing Judy identical timestamps, identical messages, identical proof. Judy nodded. Ethan scoffed. "You are all acting as though I committed a crime. It is just a disagreement over work." "A disagreement," Judy repeated slowly, "that somehow required a falsified contract." Ethan sat back, jaw tightening. "I did not tell anyone to falsify anything. You told me to print it," the assistant whispered. "Shut up," Ethan hissed under his breath. But the courtroom heard it. Everyone did. Judge Judy's eyes sharpened. "Mr. Mercer, arrogance is loud, truth is louder." The mother, who had been shrinking into herself all morning, finally leaned forward. Her hands trembled as she reached for her son's shoulder. "Ethan," she whispered, voice cracking, "stop making this worse." He pulled away from her touch as though it burned. Maria kept her gaze fixed on Judy, refusing to acknowledge Ethan's theatrics. "Your Honor, I attempted to get paid dozens of times. Every attempt is documented. Every promise he made, every excuse, every avoidance." Judy nodded slowly. "You were patient. I was hopeful," Maria corrected softly. "That was my mistake." The room fell into a heavy quiet, not hostile, not triumphant, but deeply human. Judy turned back to Ethan. "Mercer, do you have anything at all, that contradicts these timestamps?" Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "No," he finally muttered. "I suppose not." Judy folded her hands, studying him the way a surgeon studies an infection. "Then we move forward with the truth." Her gaze shifted past Ethan to the trembling woman behind him, Mrs. "Mercer," she said quietly, "did you know any of this?" And the way the mother froze told the room the next fracture in the story was about to come from her. The courtroom exhaled, not in relief, but in anticipation. Something heavier was coming, something weightier than forged ink and half-truths. And it arrived in Maria's hands, glowing faintly on the screen of her phone. Maria stepped forward again, holding her phone with the same steadiness she had shown all morning. But this time the room felt different. Everyone leaned closer, as though the next piece of truth carried its own gravity. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "I brought video." The words dropped like a pin in a cathedral. Small, echoing, impossible to ignore. Judge Judy raised her eyes, and the courtroom's heartbeat seemed to slow. "Video of what, Miss Santos?" Maria tapped the screen. A small preview began to play. A work site, tools, sunlight, and Ethan Mercer walking across the frame with the air of someone who owned not just the land, but the very air surrounding it. "My security cameras recorded the renovation process," she explained, "including every visit he made to the property." Ethan stiffened. "This is an invasion of privacy." Judy shook her head. "Not when you knowingly enter someone else's property. Not when the cameras are clearly visible." Her tone sharpened. "And not when you owe someone months of unpaid work." Maria handed the phone to the bailiff, who carried it to the bench. Judy pressed play. The footage filled the room with the harsh, unfiltered honesty only cameras provide. There was Ethan, waving his hand dismissively as Maria explained a structural concern. There he was again, criticizing her work in a tone dripping with contempt. Another clip showed him strolling through the renovation site with friends, visibly impressed by progress he arrogantly claimed as his own. But the clip that froze the courtroom came last. Ethan on camera standing inches from Maria, saying with unmistakable clarity, "You will get paid when I decide you should get paid. Not before." The audio was crisp, the arrogance undeniable. A collective breath dragged through the room. Ethan's face drained. That is taken out of context. 4:43 p.m. Judy paused the video and stared at him. Explain the context in which that sentence becomes acceptable. He opened his mouth. No words came. His throat moved in a hard swallow, his eyes drifting toward his mother, searching perhaps for rescue. But she sat still, hands folded tightly, a quiet apology carved into her expression. She had nothing left to defend. Maria looked at him, not with anger but with something worse. Recognition of exactly who he had chosen to become. Ethan reached for the table, steadying himself. Fine, he muttered. Fine, show the video. His voice cracked. But that footage, it does not show everything. The room went still. Judge Judy leaned in. What does it not show? Ethan's jaw clenched. The lie forming behind his eyes twitched, flickered, then faltered. His mother whispered urgently, Ethan, stop, please. But pride is louder than fear, louder than wisdom, louder than family. Some things, he blurted, happened off camera. Maria blinked, the first sign of confusion from her all day. Judy's expression sharpened. Off camera, she repeated. And what exactly happened off camera? Ethan froze. He had said too much, far too much. The air in the room thinned, sharp enough to cut. Judy's voice dropped to a cold murmur. Mr. Mercer, what are you afraid that video will reveal next? The footage had stopped, but its echo had not. Ethan sat frozen, as if time had finally refused to protect him. And then the next clip began, unfiltered, unforgiving, undeniable. The bailiff tapped the screen lightly and the footage resumed. The sound of gravel crunching under footsteps filled the courtroom, oddly intimate, as though the distance between truth and exposure was narrowing with every passing second. In the video, Maria stood by the unfinished porch steps, calmly discussing the materials needed to complete the job. Her tone was measured, patient. The voice of someone who believed professionalism would eventually earn respect. Ethan, however, hovered with the restless energy of someone who considered patience beneath him. On screen, he waved a hand dismissively. Just finish it, he snapped. Stop telling me about problems, fix them. The real Ethan flinched in his seat. Several audience members exchanged glances, not surprised, but affirmed. The kind of affirmation that says, yes, this is who he is. This is what we heard in his voice from the very beginning. The next clip landed harder. Ethan on camera, pacing. Maria standing still, waiting. And then his voice unmistakable. People like you never understand how business works. You do what I say, and maybe I pay you. Maria closed her eyes briefly as the memory moved through her. The real Ethan's face flushed, not with shame, but with fear. The kind of fear that surfaces when the story you constructed begins to strangle itself. Judge Judy watched carefully, her expression unreadable except for the slight tightening around her eyes. The sign she had just mentally locked in a conclusion. And with Judy, a conclusion is a verdict waiting for delivery. She paused the video. Mr. Mercer, she said evenly, this is not arrogance. This is contempt. He stammered, this is out of context. I was frustrated. She wasn't listening. Maria finally spoke, her voice steady. I listened to every instruction. You changed them constantly, then blamed me for not reading your mind. His mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming. She had witnessed her son act entitled before, but this level of cruelty felt unfamiliar. Or perhaps she had simply refused to see it until now. Judge Judy leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, 5 separate clips show you dismissing her work, withholding payment, and claiming credit for her efforts. Is there anything that contradicts the pattern presented here? Ethan's jaw moved, opening and closing like a door that no longer fit its frame. I didn't mean truth. Judy said, tapping the table lightly, is not determined by what you meant, it is determined by what you did. She resumed the footage briefly. The final clip played, Ethan laughing with 2 friends as they admired the renovated exterior. One friend asked whether he had hired help. Ethan responded with a grin. Why would I pay someone when they keep coming back anyway? The courtroom inhaled sharply. The real Ethan went still, then paler, then smaller. Judge Judy paused the video and turned her full attention to him. You said earlier the footage does not show everything, she said quietly. So tell me, what part are you afraid of? Ethan's eyes moved to Maria, to his mother, to the exit, everywhere except Judy's gaze, which waited without mercy. His throat tightened, his fingers gripped as failed him entirely. Judy leaned back, letting silence become the interrogation. Mr. Mercer, she said, truth is moving now. You can either move with it or be crushed by it. And Ethan's silence revealed more than any confession ever could. He tried to smile, but it was the kind of smile that cracks before it even forms. The courtroom felt smaller now, as though the walls themselves were pressing inward. Judge Judy waited, giving him the kind of space that exposes dishonesty more effectively than any question. Ethan shifted forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlocked so tightly his knuckles whitened. He attempted a laugh, a thin, brittle sound that dissolved halfway out of his throat. He began, All of this is being exaggerated. You are seeing one edited angle, not the complete picture. She was. Judy raised a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. Mr. Mercer, the only thing being edited here is your memory. The audience murmured softly, an unspoken agreement rippling through the room. Ethan's mother pressed a trembling hand to her chest, unable to look at him directly. She appeared caught between fear for her son and dread of what he might say next. 4:44 p.m. Ethan inhaled sharply. You are acting as though I am some kind of monster. I was under pressure. The project was falling behind. She was not cooperating. Maria lifted her gaze slowly. Cooperating. Do you mean working 12-hour days because you kept changing your requests at the last minute? He turned on her instantly. You know nothing about real responsibility. Do not raise your voice at her. Judy snapped. And for the first time all day, Ethan startled visibly. His shoulders jerked as though someone had pulled a string attached to his spine. Judy leaned in slightly. Tell me about this pressure you mentioned. What exactly were you trying to accomplish? He hesitated. A thin line of perspiration formed along his hairline. His eyes moved toward his mother. She coiled plea, and responded with a slow, sorrowful shake of her head. But Ethan chose pride over caution. I had deadlines, he muttered. I wanted to show my father I could handle something on my own. Judy's brows drew together. So you hired Miss Santos for a renovation project in order to impress him. Not just impress him, Ethan insisted. He thinks I am irresponsible. I wanted to prove him wrong. Was deception part of that plan? His breath caught. I did not lie. I just stretched the truth. Maria's voice was quiet. You stretched it until it broke. The room grew painfully still. Ethan dragged a hand through his hair, his movements frantic now. Never lets me do anything. Everything is controlled, every dollar, every decision. If this project failed, he would use it as another excuse to say I do not deserve anything. His mother closed her eyes, not because she disagreed, but because she had witnessed this spiral before, many times. So this was never about business, or timelines, or professionalism. This was about insecurity. Ethan's jaw tightened. I am not insecure. Then why? Judy said, her voice lowering. Does every explanation you offer collapse under the slightest pressure? He swallowed hard. Because you are twisting my words. No, she said. Your panic is twisting them. His breathing quickened. He looked around frantically, at Maria, at the cameras, at the place where his confidence used to stand. But nothing answered back. The golden armor was gone. All that remained was a frightened young man trying to outrun the truth. And then Ethan said something sharp, sudden, and entirely unguarded. I did what I had to because she would not listen. The courtroom froze. Because this time even he understood what he had just admitted. His outburst hung in the air like a gunshot no one had anticipated. Even he appeared stunned by the words that had escaped him. Judge Judy leaned forward slowly, deliberately, as though approaching someone who did not yet realize how deeply they had wounded themselves. The courtroom stood inside a silence so dense it felt like a second atmosphere. Ethan's chest rose and fell too quickly. His expression stretched between defiance and the dawning awareness that he had just exposed something far deeper than dishonesty. Judy's voice dropped to a controlled murmur. Mr. Mercer, what do you mean she would not listen? He froze. His lips trembled, attempting to rebuild the walls he had spent years constructing. The arrogance, the composure, the rehearsed superiority. But panic had punched straight through them, and the pieces lay scattered at his feet. Ethan swallowed hard. I did not mean it like that. Maria stood still, hands clasped gently in front of her. No accusation, no anger, just a quiet sorrow that seemed to unsettle him far more than any confrontation could. Judy continued, her tone neither tender nor harsh, but piercing. Then explain it. Because the only thing Miss Santos did was attempt to do her job. Ethan's eyes moved around the courtroom as though searching for a version of himself he could step back into. But none of them fit anymore. Finally, he whispered. She would not listen to what I needed. Judy did not blink. And what did you need? And he opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His mother leaned forward, voice trembling. Ethan, sweetheart, you do not owe anyone an image in this room. Just tell the truth. That single word, truth, broke something open. Ethan slumped back in his chair, hands covering his face. When he spoke, the sound was muffled, trembling, almost childlike. I needed something to go right. A murmur moved through the courtroom, soft, empathetic, unexpected. Judy's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Go on, my whole life, Ethan whispered. My father has decided who I am before I ever had the chance to become it. If I fail at anything, he calls me useless, says I am a disappointment, says I am only where I am because of him. He dragged his hands slowly down his face. This project was supposed to be mine, my chance, my proof. Maria's eyes softened. Even she felt the pain buried beneath the destruction. Ethan continued, voice cracking. But things went wrong. Delays, mistakes. I panicked. I thought if I admitted it, he would be right again. And I cannot. His breath shuddered. I cannot let him be right. Judy nodded slowly, thoughtfully. Not in agreement, but in understanding. So instead of asking for help, you lied. I forged the contract, he whispered. The admission finally breaking free. 40:44 p.m. I told my assistant to print it. I thought if I made everything appear official, I could fix the rest afterward. His mother covered her mouth with a trembling hand, tears spilling over. Maria whispered, barely audible. You could have simply told the truth. He turned toward her, eyes wet, voice raw. I did not know how. The confession landed in the room like a softened blow, painful but human. Judge Judy's voice became the spine of the room. Mr. Mercer, this case stopped being about money a long time ago. What you have shown today is a lifetime of fear dressed as arrogance. Ethan looked down. For the first time, he had nothing left to hide behind. Judy leaned back, eyes steady, verdict forming. But now, she said quietly, we must address the damage you caused while trying to protect a lie. And the room braced, because truth had finally undone him, and consequence was next. Ethan's confession still trembled in the air, fragile as glass. No one spoke, not because they lacked words, but because truth had consumed all the available space. And in that stillness, the weight of everything he had done began to settle on him. The shift was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was the slow unraveling of a young man who had run out of places to hide. Ethan sat with his shoulders collapsed inward, the facade gone, the shine gone, the pretense gone. For the first time all day, he looked exactly his age. Not a wealthy man's son, not the self-appointed authority over a renovation project. Just a frightened young man in his 20s who had constructed his identity on borrowed power and brittle pride. His mother reached out a tentative hand. It hovered for a moment above his arm before finally resting there, a gentle, trembling anchor. Ethan did not pull away this time. He no longer had the strength to. Judge Judy observed them quietly. Her eyes were not cold now. They were precise, reflective. There is a difference between judgment and understanding, and she knew exactly when to apply each one. Mr. Mercer, she said, fear explains your choices. It does not excuse them. Ethan nodded once, a small, unsteady movement that carried years of suppressed pain. I know. Maria stepped forward slightly, but she did not gloat. She did not scowl. Her posture was calm, her eyes soft but resolute. She had come here for justice, not vengeance. I did not want to humiliate you, she said gently. I just needed what I had earned. Her words were simple, but they landed with the full force of everything he had tried to avoid. Ethan swallowed hard. I am sorry, he whispered. Not the defensive apology he had deployed earlier. Not the sarcastic version he used like a shield. This was different, stripped of ego, stripped of performance. A fractured apology from someone who had finally come to understand the extent of their own damage. Maria nodded once, accepting it without releasing him from responsibility. Judy leaned forward slightly. Miss Santos, your composure throughout this entire ordeal has been remarkable. Most people would have walked away long before today. Maria looked down. I did not want to allow him to treat me as though I did not matter. And you did not, Judy replied. You held your ground. Ethan flinched. Not at her words, but at the truth behind them. Maria had demonstrated the strength he had always wished he possessed. Mrs. Mercer wiped her eyes. Is not a bad person, she whispered. He is just lost. Judy nodded slowly. Losing yourself is human. Hurting others to protect that lost version of yourself is where the line is drawn. Ethan's eyes welled again. I did not realize how much damage I was causing. You did not allow yourself to realize it, Judy corrected, because realizing it would have forced you to question the story you built about who you are. The words struck deep. Ethan looked down, a quiet tremor moving through him. Judge Judy straightened the papers before her. The sound, crisp, deliberate, signaled the shift from emotion to consequence. This court acknowledges your honesty today, she said, but we must still address the harm. Her tone was firm but not unkind. The audience leaned in, sensing the pivot. Judy lifted the judgment file, her eyes sharpening with purpose. No, she said, we must address what comes next. And for the first time since the case began, Ethan Mercer looked truly, deeply afraid of the answer. Mrs. Mercer rose slowly, as though the air itself resisted her movement. For hours she had been shrinking into her chair. Now she stood, every trembling breath exposing what she had spent the morning trying to conceal. The courtroom fell silent, not for drama, for heartbreak. Mrs. Mercer approached the bench with the kind of hesitant dignity only a mother carries, torn between love and accountability. Her eyes glistened, not with tears alone, but with years of unspoken fear. Your Honor, she said softly. May I speak? Judge Judy nodded. You may. Ethan glanced up at his mother, confusion flickering beneath his exhaustion. Mom, you do not have to. But she did, she had to. The weight she had carried all morning demanded release. She took a steadying breath. I need to say this, not just for the case, but for my son. Her voice cracked, and Ethan's posture straightened instinctively, protective, desperate. But this was not a moment he could control. 4:45 p.m. Ethan was not raised to lie, she continued, but he was raised under pressure. The courtroom listened. His father is a demanding man, she said, choosing her words with painful precision. He believes perfection is the only acceptable standard. Every mistake Ethan made growing up became a lecture. Every failure became a punishment. Every success was credited to someone else. Ethan's head dropped, shame rolling off him in waves. Mrs. Mercer wiped a trembling hand beneath her eye. I tried to protect him. I tried to be the soft place he could land. But I failed him. Not because I did not love him, but because I never taught him to face his mistakes. I taught him to conceal them. Judy's expression softened, but her gaze remained firm. Mrs. Mercer, acknowledging that now is meaningful, but enabling him. That is also part of what led him here. His mother nodded, the movement heavy with regret. I know. And I am so sorry. She turned to Maria, whose posture eased with empathy. Miss Santos, you were caught in the crossfire of a boy trying to prove he was a man. That is not fair, and it is not your burden to carry. Maria bowed her head gently, accepting the sentiment. Mercer then faced her son. Ethan, she whispered, you cannot build a life on fear or deception. I know you believe I expect perfection, but I do not. I simply want you to be honest. With others, and with yourself. The words struck him harder than Judy's questions, harder than the video evidence, harder than his own confession. Ethan's eyes filled, tears rising and falling silently down his face. I am sorry, he choked. Mom, I am so sorry. She stepped closer, not to shield him this time, but to let him stand in the truth he had been running from. Judge Judy cleared her throat gently. Mrs. Mercer, your candor is appreciated. But this court's responsibility is to address the harm done, regardless of the circumstances behind it. Mrs. Mercer nodded. I understand, Your Honor. Judy turned her gaze to Maria. Miss Santos, you have been patient and have shown considerable restraint. Is there anything you wish to add before I move to judgment? Maria exhaled softly. Only this, I do not hate him. I simply needed to be treated with fairness. Her words drifted gently through the room, settling like dust caught in sunlight. Judy closed the file before her with a single, decisive sound. Then fairness, she said, is exactly what comes next. And the courtroom braced as justice finally moved toward them with steady, unhurried steps. Ethan straightened suddenly, as though grabbing the frayed edges of his dignity before they slipped away entirely. His voice steadied, not with arrogance this time, but with something rawer. Desperation. And for the first time, he attempted to rewrite the ending rather than the truth. Your Honor, Ethan said, rising to his feet with a trembling resolve. I want to make this right. The room shifted. Even Judge Judy paused, studying him with the sharp, measured caution of someone who had witnessed many last-minute transformations and understood how rarely they were genuine. Ethan swallowed. I will pay her everything I owe, and more. Double, triple if necessary. I want to fix this. Maria blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. She opened her mouth to speak, but Judy raised a hand, silencing the room. Mr. Mercer, she said, money is not the issue. Ethan's voice cracked. But money, Judy repeated firmly, is the least significant part of what you took from her. He deflated slowly, like something left to sink to the floor. His mother stepped beside him, placing a steadying hand on his arm. Ethan, listen. But Ethan was not ready to listen. Not yet. I know I made terrible choices, he insisted. I lied. I panicked. I caused damage. But I am saying I am sorry. Does that not count for something? Maria stepped forward gently. It counts, she said. But apologies do not erase what happened. They simply begin the healing. Ethan's breath faltered. He had constructed his entire world around the belief that money resolved everything. Reputations, relationships, consequences. But this room, these people, this judge, they wanted something he had spent his entire life avoiding. Accountability. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. You believe that offering her more than she is owed makes you honorable. It does not. It only reveals that you are frightened now. He winced. His mother squeezed his arm. Ethan, she is right. The words landed harder than any ruling could. Maria continued, her voice soft. I do not want to destroy you. I simply want to matter. I want the work I did, the time I gave, to be acknowledged. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time throughout the entire proceeding, his eyes glistened. I am sorry, he whispered again. But this time, the apology was not for the courtroom. It was for her. Judge Judy nodded, acknowledging the change. Growth begins where dishonesty ends. Today you chose to stop lying. That is something. Ethan drew in an unsteady breath. Thank you, Your Honor. But it does not absolve what was done, Judy continued. The air tightened. Ethan steadied himself, bracing. What happens next? Judy folded her hands, the motion crisp and final. Justice happens next. As it always does. The audience leaned forward, sensing the verdict drawing near. Ethan's shoulders tensed, his mother's fingers intertwining tightly with his. Maria stood still, prepared for whatever truth was finally arriving, and Judge Judy's gaze sharpened with the unmistakable weight of decision. She opened the judgment file with deliberate precision. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "here is what this court will order." The entire room held its breath as the verdict began to take shape in the silence before the sentence. The courtroom felt impossibly still, as though time itself had paused to listen. Judge Judy's eyes carried the weight of both truth and consequence, and Ethan Mercer braced himself for the one thing he had spent his entire life avoiding. Judy lifted the judgment file, its pages crisp, unyielding, and impossibly final. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Authority settled naturally over her words the way sunlight settles over stone. "Mr. Mercer," she began, "your actions were not the result of ignorance. They were the result of fear dressed as arrogance. That distinction matters." Ethan's throat tightened. He did not look at the cameras. He did not look at the audience. He looked only at the floor, where so many of his choices had finally delivered him. "Miss Santos," Judy continued, turning toward Maria, "provided consistent, credible evidence of her work, her communication, and your repeated refusal to compensate her. She conducted herself professionally at every stage. She endured a level of disrespect no one should be made to tolerate." Maria stood tall, not triumphant, simply relieved. Judy set the file down. "I find in favor of the plaintiff." A quiet exhale moved through the courtroom, not shock, but resolution, the kind that feels like breathing again after months of holding it in. Ethan closed his eyes. His mother gripped his arm, anchoring him in the moment. "Mr. Mercer," Judy continued, "you will pay Miss Santos the full amount she is owed, plus additional compensatory damages for the time and emotional suffering this ordeal has caused." Ethan nodded slowly, tears gathering at the edges of his vision. "Furthermore," Judy said, "you will provide a written acknowledgement of wrongdoing, one that reflects genuine ownership, not excuses." He swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." Maria lifted her chin slightly, not in victory, but in something gentler closure. Judy was not finished. "As for the fabricated contract," she added, and the room tensed once more. "While this court does not handle criminal charges, the evidence of falsification will be referred to the appropriate authorities for review." Ethan's breath caught, but he did not protest. For once he simply accepted. "And finally," Judy said, softening just slightly, "this court strongly recommends counseling, not as punishment, but as an opportunity for genuine growth." Ethan nodded again, tears falling without restraint. "I will," he whispered. "Thank you." His mother wrapped an arm around him, not to shield him this time, but to support him. Maria watched the exchange with quiet compassion. For everything he had put her through, she did not look at him with bitterness, only understanding. Judy leaned back, gavel in hand. "Miss Santos, justice is served. Mercer, take this moment not as an ending, but as an opportunity to begin again with honesty as your foundation." Ethan looked up, meeting her eyes with something entirely new, humility, and for the first time throughout the entire trial, Judge Judy's expression softened. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, a single, echoing sound that felt less like punishment and more like release. Maria exhaled, finally free. Ethan rose slowly but stood taller, not in pride but in acceptance. His mother held him close, relieved that the truth had not destroyed him, but reshaped him.